So we're here for the fellows reading. Please welcome Gabrielle Bates.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle Bates. I'm extremely honored to be here. What luck. My deep thanks to everyone who makes this beautiful, ongoing gathering possible. I'm going to read 3 poems from my first and only book, Judas Goat. This book is a very haunted book. It dives into disquieting terrain, thinking about relationships of various kinds with humans and other animals. I'm going to start with the first poem in the book, The Dog. He didn't want to tell me. He almost didn't. It was luck, much more than gut, that made me ask. A beer opened an hour earlier than usual, the desire for conversation. There was no sense in me that he was in some sort of aftermath. He said, when I asked, I had a bad day. Or, I had a weird day. I can't remember. I saw a dog, he said. I was on the train. A man with a dog on a leash. The man ran and made it, but the dog hesitated outside and the doors closed. No, not on his neck, on the leash, trapping it. The man was inside, and the dog was outside on the platform. The button beside the door ringed and light blinked. The man was shouting now, hitting the button, all else silent. The befuddlement of dog pulled along, the pace slow until it wasn't. The tunnel the train must pass through, leaving the station, is a perfectly calibrated, unforgiving fit. The dog had a color and a size I don't know, so it comes to me as legion, large, small, fur long or short, white or gray. But the man always looks the same. As I held him against me in our kitchen, the moment sharpened my eyes. How easily I could imagine a version of our lives in which he kept all his suffering secret from me. I saw the beer on the counter. I saw myself drink it. When we went to bed, I stared at the back of his head, split between compassion and fury. My nails gently scratching up his arm, up and down, up and down, the blade without which the guillotine is nothing. Yesterday around dinner time, I went for a much-needed run. Shout out to phenomenal poet and memoirist Taina Bambrick for letting me borrow her tennis shoes. An undersung value of conferences like this. You might get to borrow an item of clothing from one of your favorite writers, but that's not the point. The point is that while I was running, I passed by a practice field where a football team was going through their militaristic warm-ups, and I took it as a sign that I should read this next poem. I grew up in the Deep South in Birmingham, Alabama, and this poem is a kind of hometown portrait. Strawberries. A car's tires the thunk over the rubbery black tripwire at the oil change, triggering a fat bell, and a group of girls in silver leotards are reflected like spatters of sap in its windows, liquidine, firm, gleaming. It's a game day. They are the girls chosen to split in tempo to the brass band, heel of a front foot sliding over astroturf, top of a back foot grinding over lit green, cervix slapping the 50-yard line like a fried egg flipped down on a griddle to burn. Behind the bleachers, a boy takes off the shirt of another boy, paints a letter there in red paint. R, and then another boy, I-O-T. When the sun goes down over the ridge, all the painted boys will make patriots. For now, the sun rises, sanctioning the street. Jiffy Lube, pet store, the Sam Super sandwiches teens file into, practicing the joke of language. The morning is cool on the outside and hot in the restaurant. The war in the words, playful as a war can be, meaning each gut bleeds out like a slit pig's, filling the cracks in linoleum, spilling over, becoming smooth. The layers of red dry and build on one another, and for years the gap between ceiling and floor lessens. Backs hunch as the mind saws downward, revealing rings. In the parking lot, "Are you asleep?" says the boy who is not my boyfriend, running his fingers along the band of my underwear. Across the street from this, for years, an ancient tortoise roams the floor of the pet store, closing his army green beak around the red toenails of sandaled women, thinking them strawberries. I feel ashamed for all the moments I've been kind, knowing kindness is all it would take. Sometimes people will email me through my website or something and ask me what the end of that poem means. I think they usually understand it quite well. They maybe just don't feel comfortable with that kind of understanding. One of the many rare joys of this conference is that I've gotten to hang out with some playwrights, and I have a poem in the book called Intro to Theater that I really wanted to read as a way to honor that, but I don't have time to read that one. But if you buy the book, you can read Intro to Theater. That was good, right? That was good. This last poem I'm going to read, it's a short poem, and it owes a debt to the poet Vivi Francis, who I had a transformative workshop with not many years ago, but years ago, in which she called me out basically for trying to impress people in my poems rather than risking clarity and connection in them. And so I challenged myself to write what were for me really terrifyingly plain-spoken poems that ultimately I think this book really needed. And this is one of those. It's a kind of pre-elegy for my dad, and it's called Salmon. My father and I sit at a sushi bar in my new city, sampling 3 different kinds of salmon nigiri. He tells me about a great funeral speech he recently heard a son give for his father. The speech was structured around regrets everyone assumed the father didn't have, interspersed with hilarious stories involving boys crashing the family van and fishing mishaps. The ivory salmon is pale and impossibly soft. The sliver of steelhead, orange enough to pretend it's salmon. How else to say it? I am my father's only child, and he is my mother. We dip our chopsticks into a horseradish paste, dyed green and called wasabi. I know his regrets. I could list them. But instead, at his funeral, I will talk, if I can talk, about nights like this. How good it felt just to be next to him, to be the closest thing he had. Thank you. Next up, the amazing Karin Lin Greenberg.
So I am very grateful and happy to be here, and just want to say thank you to everyone who has put so much time and care and thought into making this conference a great experience. So I'm going to read today from my novel, You Are Here. It was just published in May. So it centers around characters who all work in or frequent a dying mall in upstate New York. And except for in the first chapter, you initially see each point of view character through someone else's eyes, and then later you get a chapter when they're the point of view character. So I'll read 2 passages today about a character named Kevin. He's the manager of the mall's bookstore and is dragging his feet finishing up his PhD in English because he doesn't want to go into academia. So he keeps trying to figure out other things he can do, and he thinks if he's successful, then it would be easier to step away from an academic path. And one idea he had was to build tiny houses. So now he, his wife, and 2 small children live in a tiny house in his mother-in-law's backyard, and they're miserable in that space. So the first few pages I'll read are from the point of view of Ro, who is Kevin's nosy 89-year-old neighbor, and she spends a lot of time spying on him and his family, and she also goes to the mall every week to get her hair styled because she's lonely, and this allows her to interact with people. Here's Kevin tromping across the backyard in a white beekeeping suit looking like a space explorer. How he managed to shove his enormous orange beard into the veil that hangs from his hat, Ro doesn't know. He's holding something that looks like a silver coffee pot with bellows attached to it, and each time he squeezes the bellows, a puff of smoke emerges from a spout and floats over the 2 wooden hives that have appeared in his backyard. Can Ro call some authority on him? Is it illegal to raise bees in a suburban backyard? What if swarms of angry bees escape from the hives and chase the residents of Willowbrook Drive, screaming and panicked into the streets? If Ro hadn't seen the hives Kevin put in the backyard, she might have thought this was another of his ridiculous costumes. When she goes to the mall to get her hair done, she sees him in the bookstore, where he's the manager, leading story hour dressed sometimes as a giant rabbit, sometimes as a wizard, sometimes as a chef. And lately, he's been dressed as a gnome, wearing green clogs and a pointy red hat as he sits on a small stool that looks like a mushroom and reads to children. But this beekeeper getup is no costume. The fool is actually tending to bees. Rose stares for a few moments out the kitchen window at Kevin in his beekeeper suit and then stomps to the front door and goes outside. Kevin stops squeezing his smoking contraption when Ro reaches his yard, says, "Hello, Mrs. Goodson. Your hair looks nice today." Ro just had her hair done yesterday, but she's not going to let Kevin compliment away her annoyance. "What's the meaning of all this?" she says, gesturing up and down at the 2 large hives that sit 50 feet from her home. The hives had not been there yesterday. "The meaning?" says Kevin. His voice is muffled beneath his veil. "Can you take that hat off?" says Ro. Between the veil and the overgrown beard, she can barely hear him. "I guess so," says Kevin. "I think there's enough smoke now that the bees should be drowsy." He pulls the hat off and holds it under one arm. "Are these bees going to bother my flowers?" Ro's house is surrounded by rose bushes, hydrangeas, oleander, rhododendron. Kevin shakes his big, fuzzy head. "I mean, only in the best way. Bees pollinate, Mrs. Goodson. They'll help your flowers grow." Of course she knows bees pollinate. Everyone knows this. Kevin has a way of over-explaining. He's working on a PhD in English, so he thinks he's more intelligent than everyone else, goes on too long without seeming to notice when others are getting bored. But this is because he doesn't have a teaching job, couldn't get one, even after all those years of schooling. He doesn't have students to spout off to, so he must subject others to his blathering. He's lucky parents bring their children to story hour in the bookstore because toddlers seem to be the only people willing to listen to him. All right, and then the next section I'll read is from Kevin's point of view. And so there are two things you need to know for this section. So he's decided he wants to change things in his life, so he starts with cutting his beard off right before the scene I'll read. He's still living in a tiny house, so they don't have many things, so he uses a dull pair of kitchen shears to cut off his beard so his face looks patchy. And then he also has a new idea for a business which involves border collies chasing geese away from large grassy areas like golf courses, cemeteries, and college campuses. And this is actually a real business that people run, and apparently after the dogs come a few times, the geese stay away. At the Humane Society, Kevin asks to see the dogs. There's quite the assortment. 24 have just been rescued from a hoarding situation, but are not yet ready for adoption. When one dog barks, it sets off the others in a series of howls. "Do you have any border collies?" he asks, and a woman named Wendy, leading him through the shelter, laughs. "That's not how things work here," she says. "I just thought maybe you had some housed in the back." Wendy laughs again. "This is the back. We could probably find a dog that's about the size of a border collie, but it's not too often we get purebreds." "Right, of course," says Kevin. "You know, I was talking to my neighbors. They have a dog that's half pug, and they said the woman at the shelter told them the dog was half pug, half perfection." Wendy nods. "Well, every dog is perfect, don't you think? Have you ever had a dog before?" Kevin shakes his head. "And you want an active dog?" "I'm looking for one that's good at chasing geese," says Kevin. "That's awfully specific," says Wendy. "Do you have a goose problem at your house?" "Not exactly," says Kevin, and Wendy blinks at him, looking confused. "Do you have a big yard?" "Average size yard," says Kevin. He says nothing about the much smaller than average size house. He also says nothing about the yard belonging to his mother-in-law. "Here are a few dogs you might like," Wendy says, gesturing toward 3 muscled, sturdy-looking dogs with blocky heads. They all look like they could run quickly, sink their pointy teeth into thick, heavy fallen branches, and carry the branches in their mouths for miles. They look like dogs who, despite being at the Humane Society, will have good lives once they're adopted. They look like winners who are only being briefly waylaid. Perhaps he can adopt all 3, and they can be his crew, can be trained to chase geese. Maybe a good dog can be trained to do anything. He turns and sees another dog, one who is small yet plump, about the size of Dawn and Amy's half pug, with light orange fur growing in patches. The dog holds Kevin's gaze for a long moment, then looks down to the floor of its cage and whimpers. "That's Frito," says Wendy. "She's a senior dog. She's been here for almost a year." "Why hasn't anyone adopted her?" Kevin imagines the camera focusing in tight on Frito's face in a commercial for the ASPCA. "Don't," he tells himself, "don't fall for a sad face." Senior dogs are hard to adopt out. People want puppies. Kevin sticks a finger into Frito's cage, and the dog raises her head, gives Kevin's finger a lick. "Why is she named Frito?" Wendy shrugs. She came with that name. Based on her physique, I'd say she probably enjoyed eating Fritos with her previous owner. "Can she run?" he asks. "She'd prefer a slow walk. Walks are good for her in light of her weight issues. She needs exercise. She's a calm dog. She'd be excellent with children. Do you have children?" Kevin nods. Frito's owner died, and no one from the owner's family wanted to take her. She's unfortunately had some issues with mange. The owner was elderly and couldn't properly care for her, but her fur has been coming in better since we've been treating her. It's a slow process. Kevin's hand rises to touch his own patchy beard. Wendy says, "I would be happy to waive the adoption fee. I can tell she likes you." Kevin tries to harden his resolve. No, no, no. This is a sad and pathetic dog, a loser of a dog, an unlucky dog, a literal underdog. He is almost certain this dog would be scared of geese, would not be able to drive them away or herd them. "I don't know," he says. "Let me take her out of the cage," says Wendy, reaching in front of Kevin to unlatch the door. "You two might be a perfect match. I have a sixth sense about these things." Kevin wonders if he should be insulted by Wendy saying he and the pitiful-looking dog are a perfect match. "Here you go," says Wendy as she places Frito in his arms. "Can you just imagine what it must be like to live with someone all your life and then lose that person and get taken to a shelter where you live most of the day in a cage?" Wendy looks at Kevin with her head slightly tilted, and now she too looks like one of the goddamn sad animals in the ASPCA commercials. He thinks about the speech class he took in college and the rhetorical strategies he learned, and wonders if the people who volunteer in shelters are given a list of them to employ. What is this one, appeal to pathos? "She likes you," Wendy says. Frito is resting her head on Kevin's chest, and he feels the warmth of the dog's body through his sweatshirt, feels her chest rise and fall. "I can't believe she's been here for almost a year," says Kevin. "A lot of people can't look past appearances," says Wendy, and she seems to be staring at Kevin's beard as she says it. There's something solid and good about having this dog in his arms. There's so much that is not good in his life. Maybe he can, for once, do something right. He can take this dog home and give her a good life. He could build her a house, not as big as his own, but elaborate for a doghouse. He could walk her every day, and the two of them could lose weight together, and next year, when he goes for his annual physical, the doctor will exclaim that Kevin now has an appropriate BMI, and Kevin will say he owes it all to his new dog Frito, who, by that point, might be renamed after something healthy, like Brussels sprout or cauliflower. Wendy smiles at him. "We'll give you a bag of weight loss dog food to start you out. And come over here and stand in front of the I'm adopted wall so I can take a picture to post to our Facebook and Instagram pages. You don't know what a hero you're going to be to all the volunteers here. We love Frito, and we just prayed and prayed that she'd find a good home. And well, you're the answer to our prayers." But Kevin hasn't said he'll take Frito, and he wonders if this is another rhetorical strategy being used against him. After you tell someone they're a hero who has answered prayers, can the supposed hero actually hand the dog back and say, "No, thank you"? Kevin walks toward the I'm adopted wall and looks at the lettering painted on it. On one side, in purple paint, it says, "I found my forever home." And on the other, in blue paint, it says, "Who saved who?" "Whom?" says Kevin. "What?" says Wendy. And Kevin shakes his head. "Smile," she orders. "I'll get your full name in a minute so I can tag you." Kevin holds Frito and looks into the camera and thinks that if anyone Googles him, say an old classmate who wonders how his life turned out, they will find just this photograph of him and this forlorn dog. They won't find books or articles he's written because there are none. They won't find a photo of him smiling, posing in front of a full bookshelf on the faculty page of any English department. All they will find is this image of him and his patchy beard standing against a wall holding this patchy dog. Thanks. And next up is Casandra López.
I'm going to read two poems, one newish and the other one new. I do have a content warning for suicide and gun violence. Poem for brother friend who contemplates suicide on a Saturday. Some days the bed is a heavy call, or maybe it is something else that widens that hole we search for to find the whole of us, the return of us. Your twins run across my family's yard, and I'm reminded of your own boy brown legs running across the playground, your brother trailing. This is long ago, back when my brother dug up bait worms with your grandfather, and at 5 years, he told your aunt he was going to marry her. Before all the ruckus and recklessness of teens, before my brother came to be your brother as well, you probably never imagined your grandmother would sing Amazing Grace at your brother's coming home, and sing it at my brother's a year later. Then another year, and she's singing it at my little grandpa's funeral. Her mouth opens into a song for cancer and a song for bullet, a song for backyards and funeral homes. I fear she will be singing for you too soon. You are drunk singing and shouting on the block, I love you, over and over until we can hear you over the music of motorcycle. It is so dark, I can barely make you out because the street lights here never stay on like they should. Why is nothing like it should be. Here, except we are here. Is that enough? When it is not, I get drunk on loss too. It fills me up, my hand clutching regret until I'm empty again. My mouth clings to the rind of anger. I need the taste of sting to get me up and open my eyes in the morning after so much mourning. Every day I wake up and it is not a dream. They are all still dead. Is this why you curl up in mother's lap, calling her mom, and confess? Say you want to kill yourself. Say, how do you go on? Say you are a disappointment, and I'm all sink to the floor, no words, just witness. Earlier, we are always trying to meet each other's eyes without falling, head into ocean, the salt burn of our open cuts turn canyon. I tried telling you I'm undone too, and I know no justice, can't touch it the way I could brother's rough hand. Justice doesn't look like any shape I know. I can't wear it on my ears or wrap it around my shoulders when I'm cold. I don't recognize any of the letters. I understand the call, a bullet, or something that takes you to the same place because every time I answer a door, I am ready to die. Every time I'm ready for a bullet to take me whole. I wonder if brothers saw the eyes of the ones who pulled the trigger and knew what was coming next. Or maybe he only saw the good of moonlight because the streetlights were off that night too. A teacher back home is shot and killed, and that night I dream fear. A gun in my face, it explodes, and I wake because I can. Okay, I have another happy one to read. Chiona, 1. It is true. Professors cry in crowded coffee shops, in slow city buses, and in showers. They cry in their cars and stuffy airplanes. They cry in bathroom stalls before class, blow their nose on thin toilet paper, peek through the stall door to make sure their students will not catch their exit. Their face still damp, eyeliner streaking. Realize they have never seen any of their professors cry, and so they cry harder and try to quiet a wail, heave through their shoulders, splash their face, pinch the tender and the fat of their arm, demand of themselves a drought. 2. Call me Chiona, call of the crybabies. Call me a museum of grief with a new exhibit open every month. I am desert born, so the ocean could only whisper at me. A distant seashell to ear that could not drown out the siren calls of my name. 3. Because I am a writer, I write obituaries, and I do not cry. Because I'm the writer, I'm asked to represent family, stand and tell stories as we say our goodbyes. I do not cry, only my voice cracks into the split of fresh ground. Grandmother's funeral is casually Catholic, the priest in jeans telling jokes. I mouth the rosary. Today the grass is damp. It is easy to lose your footing. If I fall, this could be the end of me, and I will turn Chiona. 4. My glasses are always smudged, my vision obscured by my own anxiety, the hasty push of fingers to glass. If necessary, they can become tiny dams, catch the swells. I think of the Mexican songs grandfather played on his record player and 8-track. Dusk gathers, but we can still hear El Rey without his queen singing llorar y llorar. I also get this kind of lonely. And I know all about drunk tears, watched many boys and men become a whirl of mean, but more often turn into messy puddles of alcohol sorrow as they sing their favorite song, llorar, llorar. 5. For a time, I entered a season of hospital wristbands, name tags, and uncomfortable chairs. We learned the names of our favorite nurses, visiting hours, and rules. Only 2 people allowed upstairs. We take turns visiting grandmother. She asked for me and I did not cry, but I remembered the waiting time, an internal time, a pause in time like the waiting after brother's surgery, the words, no brain activity. This is when I cried, for a moment, a release. But because grief turns time in circles, I don't know if I cried for 30 seconds or 30 minutes. And when that is all gone, all that is left is to wait. 6. We visited mother's sister in hospital. We packed up the car and drove from San Bernardino up the Central Valley. Some days California seems endless. We arrived, got suited up, either to protect ourselves or her from a flesh-eating disease. The first sign is easy to miss, the skin red and swollen to touch. The doctors thought she might lose her leg. She did not cry, but I want to when she says she signed the papers, do not resuscitate. They opened her leg and scraped out something vicious. Necrosis calls for oxygen, earth abundance. When we left, we could still hear her voice in the hallway. There are some days when survival is more than a word. 7. After the holidays, we visited eldest cousin in hospital. Trays of uneaten food at her side. Without her glasses, she didn't recognize me at first. We had a gift, but what she really wanted was a hamburger and Dr. Pepper. My fingers attempted to unfurl her matted hair. Diagnosed in her early 20s with bipolar, our family's inheritance, she lived a life in and out of hospitals and the streets. She's paralyzed now, but I remember her roller skating days and how she loved to enter the center of a crowd and dance and dance and dance. When she was a little girl, she turned mermaid the moment she slipped into water. But she did not cry this day because she seemed looped into some other dimension. But mother knew about the bad days, the attempts. 8. I walk across campus, passing a sign that says, "Do you know where you are going?" Most days I have no answer. I maneuver across fallen spin scooters, the orange and black of their bodies abandoned until their next use. Across from my classroom, there is an ocean. This is someone's paradise. I remember my friend who I called sister and longed for a better goodbye. There is a fist of anger that lives in me, and I tried to find comfort knowing that she made it back to this ocean, her toes curling into beach one last time. A Zoom funeral is never enough. I did not let myself cry into a screen. A year later, her sister organizes a group to catamaran out of the bay, spreading her ashes. I have no sea legs, so I'm unsteady. Yuknik, I'm crying. Thank you. And please welcome Erin Swan.
Hello, everybody. Is the sound okay? Yes, okay, cool. So I'm going to read, as many of us fellows do, from my debut book. It's my debut novel. It's called Walk the Vanished Earth. It's a family saga of 7 generations that begins on the Kansas prairie in 1873, goes through massive climate apocalypse, and ends up on Mars 200 years later. Because why not? I brought a part of this book to Sewanee 6 years ago, and everything unfurled from there. So of course I want to thank Leah and Gwen and Adam and the rest of the staff, but I also really want to thank Sewanee for changing my life. Yeah, as they do. I'm going to read the beginning of a Mars section. It's not yet 2073, it is 2046. And this is Penelope's section. And that's all I'm going to tell you. Hour 1, June 28th, 2046. 2 women trek across a desolate landscape. Their suits are stark white against the rust-colored dunes. Their big boots march forward. Their helmets amplify their breathing. Ahead, the sun rises, haloed in blue. Behind them lies a blackened shell. In their noses lingers the stink of smoke, an earth smell, one they thought they'd forgotten. The station, the place they tried so hard to call home, has exploded. One is Penelope, the other Gabrielle. 88 days ago, Penelope arrived on this planet tender and hopeful for what would come. She met Gabrielle, learned about love, struggled to maintain hope for the future. But a fire has destroyed the Red Star Station, and they are on their own under an alien sky. They want to run, but with the stiff suits and lower gravity, it's like trying to run in a dream. This is a story, Penelope tells herself, something I can shape as I go. This comforts her, for stories are familiar. Her mother, Kay, raised her on stories, ones from books, but also from Penelope's grandfather, Pa. Follow the Red Star, Pa told Kay, because his mother had told him. But Kay accepted Penelope for the grand experiment, sent her hurtling through space. She meant her daughter to be the pioneer who would carve a path for their species. She raised her on tales of heroines who undertook such missions. You are the new breed, she insisted. You will bear the next generation. You will be the mother of thousands. Penelope knew Kay desired victory, a satisfying denouement. She expected Penelope to birth a baby in this distant place, the mission to be a success. The other volunteers would circle her, cradling their newborns too. The station would ring with joy, streamers, confetti, the popping of champagne corks. Together, they would take a stand against the shrinking birth rates on Earth. They would populate a colony on this 4th planet from the sun. They would, as Pa liked to say, make the world. But as she trudges away from Red Star's burned station, Penelope knows she is no heroine, for heroines succeed in their quests. I have failed you, Mother, she thinks. Our family's dream is dead. No, she imagines Kay replying, have patience and loyalty. At the Northern Refuge, she used to spend mornings on her mother's lap poring over books. Here is Poseidon, Kay would tell her, who governs the seas. Here is Demeter, goddess of the harvest. And this mortal, pointing to a lonely woman weaving, is Penelope. That's me, she would cry. Loyalty and patience, her mother would assure her. They can have their rewards. Penelope practices uttering one word with each step. Right foot loyalty, left foot patience. It's a relief to focus on her feet instead of her belly. It hangs heavy, silvered with stretch marks. It threatens to split her suit wide open. Today marks the 28th of June, the year 2046. It's an innocent day, guileless as those on Earth. Except in 10 more, this planet's elongated calendar will read June 38th, and if the other volunteers' time is any predictor, Penelope will give birth. Or maybe before, maybe today. She is uncharted territory. These babies they have grown are something new. The dream is not dead, she tells herself. The fetus lives. You have not failed, not yet. Beside her slogs her companion, whose waistline is narrow where Penelope's juts outward. Gabrielle turns to her. Her plastic helmet magnifies her face. Penelope thinks, patience. Except she does not have to sit in one place like Odysseus' wife, weaving tapestries until her lover returns. Her lover travels with her, matching her pace to her slowed one. Loyalty, she reminds herself, it can have its reward. How will this story end? Penelope asks the specter of her mother. You tell me, this mother says, it's your story now. Penelope reaches for the other woman's hand. The woman reaches back. Penelope mouths her name so she can see Gabrielle. Gabrielle mouths something back, but she cannot tell what it is. Their hands are clumsy in their gloves. Penelope can barely feel Gabrielle's fingers in her own. They walk forward into dawn's blinding light, leaving the wreckage behind. 1 second. Hour 3. They are not alone. Someone is following them. 2 someones. Gabrielle spots them first. Look, her mouth motions, her arm pointing. Penelope can make out two figures silhouetted against a scrim of boulders. Phobos comes into focus first, then Deimos. They're not babies anymore. They're boys, teenagers, more than able to walk. They must have escaped the station, but Penelope doesn't know how. She thought everybody burned. It makes sense, though, if anybody would escape, Phobos and Deimos would. In the brief time since their birth, they've confounded all expectations. Babies on Mars, Penelope used to think. It'll be cute. But looking at the creatures behind her, that's the last word that comes to mind. Monstrous, maybe, giant. Deimos and Phobos are wearing the station's gray jumpsuits, their massive heads like orbs above. They must have long since outgrown their onesies. Maybe the geneticists clothed them, or maybe they found spare suits and put them on. They're too far away for Penelope to make out the starbursts on their breasts, but she knows they're there. Here they are, the products of the Red Star Project. She wonders whether David would be proud. She imagines him still alive, his eyes brightening at the sight of Phobos and Deimos, able to survive this atmosphere with no help at all. Yes, she thinks, he would be very proud of these babies the Red Star volunteers have grown. Her mother, Kay, should be awake by now on Earth. Penelope conjures her mother's red hair, wired with gray, less curly than her own. Her skin so much paler than Penelope's bronze, her mouth that avoids laughter. Patience, her mother would instruct, and Penelope would know she was thinking of her father, the man Kay had left behind in the floating city, Michelangelo. You're his, her mother would insist when Penelope questioned it. Look at your beautiful skin and hair, your sturdy shoulders. You have the same curve to your neck, the same distant look in your eyes. He would know you anywhere. When Penelope was little, Kay taught her to expect him. Someday, she'd insist, he'll come galloping up on horseback with paintbrushes stuffed in his pack and my history folding against his heart. He will sing us the songs of his people, and sorrow will drop from us like snow from pines. Even as a child, Penelope pitied her. When she grew older, her mother admitted it. He's gone, she confessed, drowned, most likely, as Captain gone down with his ship. Penelope is using these memories to distract herself. She does not want to think about the two figures behind them, the one she and the other volunteers named after this planet's moons. She can tell Gabrielle doesn't either. They are her experiment, after all, an experiment gone wrong. Gabrielle has already resumed walking, but faster, as though to lead Phobos and Deimos behind. Penelope follows as best she can, willing herself onward. Sweat studs her upper lip. If they were back at the station, safe under her crimson duvet, Gabrielle would lick each droplet with her tongue's tip, then Penelope's throat. But their bodies don't matter like that anymore. They are machines that need fuel, protection from weather, solar winds, radiation. The suits offer oxygen, tubes with water and liquefied nourishment. These resources, however, are finite. She turns. Phobos and Deimos have grown closer. She doesn't know what they want. They might not intend to hurt her. They could be following because Gabrielle knows where she's going, or maybe they recognize in Penelope's condition what happened to their mothers. They might want to help, she thinks hopefully, but when she looks back at them, their faces show no expression at all. Walking faster is hard. Despite her desire to keep up, her pace slows. It doesn't take long for Gabrielle to slow down too. She reaches out a glove to touch Penelope's arm, her face transmitting concern. Though her breath is rasping in her throat, Penelope smiles to reassure her. The wreckage of the station has disappeared behind them. The other one has yet to appear. Above them, Mars's moons, the real Phobos and Deimos, hover in pale silhouette. Phobos appears to speed east, while Deimos dawdles, a mere pinprick, in the other direction. Within Penelope orbits her own little moon. This moon has neared fullness. It is almost ready to burst. She glances behind at the two figures following, and then up again at their namesakes. Not even in the northern refuge, with the infinite mystery of stars spread overhead, did the sky feel so beyond her understanding. Thank you. And that's the end. I'm supposed to tell you. Now there'll be something else.